Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has in recent months, since oil prices began to fall and increased pressure noticed on the Naira, taken out a couple of measures to protect the Naira and, of course, protect Nigeria's foreign exchange external reserves as we know it. Now, very recently, a policy was announced on the management of the foreign reserves market, and this has come under sharp focus from all sectors of the economy. Now, joining me on the program to talk a little bit more about the CBN's forex management and, of course, focusing more especially on how it affects core segments of the economy, talking about the manufacturing, industrial, as well as SMEs, is Kola Ogunleye. He's a development economist and CEO, Decon Consulting. Thank you so much for coming in. Good morning to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harriet.
Well, just before we start this conversation, let's listen to the Central Bank of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry very recently organized a dialogue of some sorts with the Central Bank of Nigeria. And so we had individuals as yourself in the audience, and we had some other stakeholders from organized private sector. So let's quickly listen to that report and come back and start a conversation on this morning.
2 weeks ago, the central bank released the prohibition list of 41 items that denies importers the allocation of foreign exchange. The aftermath of that monetary policy is a barrage of reactions from business leaders across the country. This dialogue session, organized by the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, attempts to dig out the rationale behind the policy in a panel discussion with the central bank team.
Did you consider saying the ban on wheat, for instance, will take effect from 6 months' time?
All that we are saying is that we do not have sufficient foreign exchange to look after the needs of 180 million Nigerians to allow people to import toothpick. And then you have defined wire and rod. No HS code. Are you talking about steel? Are you talking about wire of steel? There's no definition. So if I go to the bank doesn't understand what you mean. They tell you it's not due for forex.
About 40% of these funds are used for banking, financial transaction, asset management issues. Another 30% of it is on oil. The rest are on luxury goods. So if you take a look at the 41 and you say you want to manage FX flow, there are items on that list that ought to have gone immediately. And the first one immediately is oil.
Explanations and complaints met analysis in their discussions, but it seems there is a resolve.
He has asked that we do a definition of the code of the item so that there will be clarity. I take that as a takeaway.
With grievances laid bare, expectations are high on what will be the central bank's next line of action.
Summary of the issues were that at the point where we are, if we're producing items in the country, there is no reason whatsoever to import them.
That they are likely to review the list. We are not saying the whole thing should be a drop. Some items there, we know they are intermediate or raw materials.
It's clear that the regulator is interested in strengthening the Naira. While the prohibition policy has seemingly affected the regulated negatively, seeking an equilibrium must be the responsibility of both parties. Temple Ashaju, Channels Business News.
So that's where we take up the conversation from this morning, Mr. Ogunleye. Let's quickly give us your perspectives on all of this.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the point to start with is to note the fact that we are in dire straits in Nigeria right now. The economy is not doing well. Oil, our major foreign exchange earner, is not doing well in the markets. We have falling prices. And out of the frustration of managing a foreign exchange revenue that is fast declining, the Central Bank of Nigeria has to do something. So we have to take it from that level. We have a situation in which your revenue is falling. You have almost an inelastic demand for that particular revenue, the foreign exchange revenue. And there's nothing in the books that you have not tried your hand on. We have a situation where monetary policy has been very tight. Increasing the interest rates, you have dipped your hand into your reserves to defend the Naira. So what do? That is the point the central bank reached. And then they said, look, we have to do something that is extra, something that is more than the conventional method of dealing with this kind of situation.
But in trying to deal with the situation, could they have looked at another option of, for instance, not bringing out the whole 41 items on that list? Maybe start with 20 or 30?
Yeah. Let's look at it this way. The situation is such that the central bank has an obligation, it has a mandate, for instance, to defend the naira. The inflow of foreign exchange into the economy has declined, and then you have to do something about it. The moment you start dilly-dallying, you will not get it right. So when the central bank wants to move on matters like this, it has to take a comprehensive look and review the whole range of items based on standard criteria. I think that is what everybody is talking about. Where are the criteria for determining the number of items on that list? We have all come to the conclusion that something has to be done beyond the conventional monetary policies that we have. So what do you do and how do you go about it? That's where central bank has to be transparent, and a clear criteria must be developed to determine those items. Talking about 20, 30, 40 is not even the issue. The issue is what quantum of the total foreign exchange inflow into the country does that represent? Will it make the magic happen in terms of defending the naira going forward? So because if you talk about 41 items and it just amounts to about 0.05% of foreign exchange inflow, that may not make any difference. And you might have a single item. For instance, in a recent interview by the Dangote chief executive at McKinsey, with McKinsey Institute, he said over 38% of our foreign exchange is spent on oil imports. You get my point now? So if you have a situation like that, what do you do about that? You can't do anything about that in the meantime. Oil is energy. That's what we use there. Although we produce oil, but we also import a lot of oil. So 30% of that goes into that. Some people have put it at 21%. But in that interview, he said 38%. So you are looking at a situation where you practically have no choice. The kind of choices that are available to the Central Bank of Nigeria are not palatable.
So as a development economist, what criteria now should begin to guide the CBN's deployment and even possibly implementation of forex management to ensure financial stability?
Yes, the financial stability question is about the most important question at this time, because if you allow your naira to fall up to a point where you want to buy a loaf of bread and you have to go with a truckload of naira, that would be too bad for us. So the criteria should be what is strategic for our manufacturing industries. And that's what I think that's the president of the LCCI was talking about, setting up criteria that clearly distinguishes between what is raw material, what is finished goods, what is intermediate goods. That became a sore point in their decision criteria, because there are some items, and you had the Director of Monetary Policy saying there that that's a major takeaway. Because what is a raw material for me is a finished good for you. Probably. What is an intermediate good for me is a raw material. So you need to look at that in a very comprehensive manner and come to decisions that can be defended, that are transparent. Because you're also sending signals to the various markets and citizens that this is the way we want to go now. And don't forget also that this marks of some kind of fiscal policy, but it's not fiscal policy. It is not import substitution either. What they are trying to do is manage the declining revenue that they have. They cannot satisfy everybody. But how do you determine? Without being seen as picking winners and losers in the economy. Because if you ban wheat, you ban rice, you ban cement, some people might just be doing their calculations and say, oh, who are the producers of those goods in this country? And how can you quickly move into the production of those materials that are critical to our survival? For instance, wheat is used in bread and some other confectionaries and all of that. And there are so many items in that list that are also very important for various segments of the industry. Some of the industrialists that we consult for have indicated that some of those products that they are classifying as finished goods are not really finished goods. They are raw materials in their own processes. And then you have to look at the employment generating capacity of some of the companies that are claiming that the products there are raw materials. Because you want to look at the economy in its totality. You are not going to satisfy a part of the economy and then leave the other side to suffer. While you are trying to manage this, what I call managing scarcity. That's what central bank is doing right now.
But then you see central bank's hands are, well, I won't say they're tied, they're practically pushed to the wall. Yeah. Defend the naira, protect the currency as much as possible, and ensure that you and I, taxpayers' monies, don't go poof, as the case may be. But in doing that, it now seems as if they're also trying to manage fiscal responsibilities somehow.
Yes. There is a very important attribute of central banks globally, and that's credibility. Credibility and transparency. These are very important attributes of central banks. And that's why sometimes when difficult decisions are going to be taken, you have to run away from a situation where, because fiscal policies are the domain of the politicians. And you know what politicians can do. Right now, we need fiscal intervention in this matter. Economic policy, macroeconomic policy hinges on two major arms, the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. And both of them have to work hand in hand together. For example, as they are talking about restricting foreign exchange, which some people are saying is marks of some form of controls on the flow of capital and resources in the country. The most important thing that should happen again is that the finance ministry in this country must come up with their own plans. That's the fiscal plan in terms of taxes, expenditures, duties, and all of that. That is the only way the central bank policies can be complemented as it is. Right now, they are standing alone, and that's why a lot of people are feeling the heat. But had it been that we have the fiscal authorities are alive to their responsibilities as we speak, they should be putting their heads together right now to see what they have to do about the economy. But it's only the central bank, because they don't have the kind of credibility that central banks have. Because if you tell them not to spend, they will spend. Look at what has happened in the last 3-4 years. And we are talking about, so fiscal decisions have to be made to complement the monetary policy regime.
So in making those decisions in about 30 seconds or thereabout, because we're out of time, totally out of time, the Central Bank of Nigeria MPC meeting comes up in 2 weeks. With all of this, you know, with the macroeconomic headwinds and all the battles we're facing with the currencies and, of course, the inflation rate rising and uncertainty in the economic landscape, do you think that the MPC should begin to think about readjusting interest rates?
Let me say this. For them to come to the point where they are talking about controls of this nature, or restrictions on this nature, they've exhausted what they can do with interest rate. There's a limit to which you can push interest rate. The interest rate has always been going northwards in this country, going up. So you cannot begin to say you want to increase interest rates or you want to dip your hand into the reserve again. That's where you have to look at okay, we have some good news coming in, that the external reserves have jumped up to over $30 billion. But what we really need is between $44 and $66 billion as an emerging economy with our population. So we are still far away from that.
Well, Mr. Agunleye, thank you so much for coming on the program and sharing your perspectives with us. We hope to have you in the studio in the coming days.
Okay, thank you.
Business Morning continues in just a moment. Please stay with us.